Good morning, everybody. Romel Santiago here once again. So, today we're actually going to be talking about pathways to recovery. Now, recovery can be a lot of different things. But whether we're talking about substances, alcohol, masturbation, porn, etc., right? At the end of the day, any pathway to recovery is built on essentially what's called a harm reduction model. And harm reduction can be reducing the how we engage in this particular behavior all the way down to eliminating this particular behavior. Eliminating is still harm reduction. Stopping use is still harm reduction because it is still lower than your using history. So, one of the ones that we already know of when we talk about any kind of pathway to recovery is something that most of us have already heard about. This is the 12 step program. Now, the 12 step program is not the only program of recovery. It is not the only pathway. It is very, very popular. It is very, very accessible, but it is by far the only pathway to recovery. There are those folks who swear by the 12 step program, and there are those folks who do not like it. There are pros and cons of the 12 step program. It works for a lot of people. Unfortunately, the 12 step program is an anonymous program. So, in terms of actually compiling research of the 12 step program, that makes it a lot more difficult because there's no way to, it is an anonymous program, right? There's the way in which we gather information in order to conduct research. I'm not going to step on that soapbox, but um, it has its pros and cons, right? At the end of the day, the 12 step program is about eliminating. I'm not going to get into the pros and cons because that is my own personal bias and I don't want to force that onto anybody else. One of the other pathways of recovery is called smart recovery. Smart recovery is the therapeutic cognitive behavioral therapy approach to substance abuse treatment. Now, what this looks like is, again, it is a form of harm reduction. It's about eliminating or reducing your primary substance in order to replace it with something else, something that we call coping skills. Right? How are we utilizing some of our coping skills? How are we stepping out of our box and trying something new? Essentially, it boils down to action plus belief equals consequence. The action is stress. My life gets stressful. I want to smoke a blunt. The outcome, I'm less productive. All right. So if we change the action, if we reduce the stress, or if we reduce smoking a blunt to smoking a joint, or smoking a cigarette, or doing something else, then the outcome changes. All we need to do is change one of these particular parts of the equation in order for the outcome to change. And that's oftentimes both the 12 steps and smart recovery utilize groups. The difference between a support group and a therapeutic group is that the therapeutic group, aka smart recovery, is led by a therapist. The support group is led by peers. And so it's all about what has worked for me as an individual versus what the research says that may be beneficial for you. And then we have the Buddhist approach, and this is refuge or Dharma recovery, right? These particular approaches to substance abuse, to out of control behaviors, is really this foundation in meditation, this foundation to connection, this foundation to spirituality, not religion. Spirituality. What is my belief system, and how am I tapping into that? How am I grounding myself in that so that I can progress forward without being tied down to this particular substance, without being tied down to this out of control behavior? And then you have other support groups that have spun off of the 12 steps just because of how some folks have perceived the 12 steps and some of the limits within the 12 steps. And that's Life Ring, and some of the other peer-led groups are really aimed at similar outcomes or similar approaches to the 12 steps with less of the emphasis on what could be perceived as the hierarchy of sobriety, right? So folks who have 20 years of sobriety um, are more acceptable or more accepted. One of the other things that some of these approaches have historically said is that there's this idea that the 12 steps has been perceived as a more of a cult, whereas the 12 steps is really emphasizes going to meetings on a regular basis, touching base with your sponsor, reading the book, and really following a very strict and structured program. Whereas some of these other support groups are really aimed at integrating the support group within your already existing life. So when we talk about pathways to recovery, you are the expert in your life. I always, as a therapist, I always encourage my clients to explore multiple pathways um, that so that they can get a better understanding of these different pathways. And some clients that I have utilize multiple. Some are in the 12-step program and in Smart Recovery. It's not one or the other. It's not all or nothing. You don't have to pick and choose. You can. Lots of people have danced between these programs. Lots of people have had lots of success exploring their individualized pathway to recovery. And if you're having trouble identifying your pathway to recovery, then my recommendation would be speak to a mental health professional with that particular goal in mind. I want to identify my pathway of recovery. And so as I explore, I'm coming back and we're talking about it. I'm coming back and I'm exploring, I'm coming back, we're processing it. I'm exploring, I'm coming back, we're processing it before I decide. So however you decide that you're going to navigate through the various pathways of recovery, make sure that you have an idea in mind and that you are aware that you are the expert in your life and that you have the power to make this particular choice. And you don't have to do this alone. So, I hope you got something out of that. And with that being said, we do have to pause. But I hope you all have a wonderful, amazing rest of this beautiful day. And I will see you soon.